Okay, we're ready to get started. Welcome everyone to the evening call. Welcome our host, Chris Coe from United Way.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining. My name is Chris Coe with the United Way of Greater Los Angeles and your moderator for today's conversation. This is the 8th community conference call hosted by the United Way of Greater LA and our Everyone In campaign, which is all of you joining today. We have been focused on building public and political will to end homelessness, specifically by creating more supportive and affordable housing across LA County, because we know that housing ends homelessness. There are over 3,000 counties in America, and if you can believe it, which you probably can believe because we're all living in LA, has the worst housing affordability, the most overcrowding, and unfortunately the highest rates of unsheltered homelessness. And decades of underinvesting in the solution, we have reached a critical point, a breaking point. But we wouldn't be here if we were just going to talk about all of the problems, because again, that's not anything we need to tell you about. You see it, that's why you're here. But we do think this can also be a turning point, though. We think there is reason for hope. And a big part of that is this new broad coalition of community-based organizations and leaders that have come together to tackle this crisis, this housing and homelessness crisis, specifically through a lens of economic and racial justice. This coalition that we are also a proud member of, it's called Our Future LA. It's growing and it's building. And so we wanted to dedicate this community call today, which is part of our ongoing series, to understanding what this coalition hopes to be, and most importantly, how you can get involved to grow it out to be the coalition we all want it to be. So the goal is we want this to feel and flow like a discussion. Obviously, we're in a digital world. I personally love nothing more than a good panel. It's one of my dreams in life, just to be part of conversations, but Zoom is hard. but we'll do our best to make it feel like a conversation. To be part of that, feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We've already received some questions from you all out there, and we'll try to answer those during the conversation as well at the end. And if it's not real time, we'll also try to get to it later through social media. So look down below the little Q&A box down there, and please submit your questions there. So there are 3 parts. We're going to break down today's conversation into 3 parts. Part 1, we want to zoom out a little bit to get a full breakdown on just the basics. A coalition is nothing without the people who are part of it. So we want to dig into that, hear from some members of our steering committee, and so to hear about who's in the coalition and why they're in it. Then we will look at what this coalition is trying to do. And when we call it our future, what do we mean by that? What are we trying to shape in terms of our future? And finally, we'll look at what's at stake. Like what is the moment we're in? If we don't take bold action now, what happens? And of course, how you can be part of this and how you can push this forward and make this an even better coalition. So as we jump in for each group of panelists in each section, I'll start with a question and then move to a little bit of a conversation between them. So part 1, as we jump into this, who's in it and why in this incredible coalition. So just to set the scene a little bit before we jump into it with our panelists. So our future, it aims to be a coalition that creates a county where everyone, every single person, we mean everyone. When we say everyone, we mean actually everyone, has access to a safe home in a vibrant, thriving neighborhood where we can all succeed. And how can we all succeed? We can all succeed because we've dismantled a lot of the racist policies that keep people poor. If you've read, even a little bit beyond the regular history books that you get during school, how the community we have and all the dividing lines we have are not an accident. They've been intentionally created. So we want to change that, dismantle that. And this coalition firmly believes that's possible, that homelessness can be something that we look back on because we've invested in housing and care. So all the groups who've come together for this cause and this coalition are working at it from different angles, from the housing justice angle, from the racial justice angle, from the economic justice angle. But we are united in that common cause and that common vision. We'll be dropping in the chat right now a link to the Our Future website. So the website is up and live. Things are real now and there are a website and a social handle. So this is officially a real coalition. So take a look at that as we start getting going. We'll hear from a couple of our steering committee members, but there are many more. We'll hear from others beyond, but look at who signed on. Look at who's on our steering committee. These are powerful leaders who have done it with great intention. And we know that's key. We know that the key to driving transformational change is working together, this kind of shared leadership, shared visioning. So we want to talk about this bold endeavor. And we have Joe Delgado, Los Angeles Director with the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. You might know them as ACE. They've been in the streets, in the halls, working at this for a very long time. So we're honored to be joined by Joe. And also Chase Engelhardt with Climate Planning and Resilience Coordinator with Climate Resolve, a key ally looking at this broadly from the EJ perspective and talking about how this matters for so many reasons. So welcome to you both. Joe, I want to start with you. So if you would be willing to, if you could tell us a little bit about who ACE is for anyone out there who hasn't run into you all and why you have chosen to be part of this coalition.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. And thanks, Chris. ACE is a statewide grassroots organization. We're in 6 counties in California. We're here in Los Angeles. We're based out of South Central near the USC main campus. We're a multi-issue group that works primarily, in and around LA County. Our members have been leading on a number of different issues over the last 10 years. More recently, we've seen a lot of organizations direct a lot of capacity and resources towards this issue that we're talking about today. ACE is definitely in that mix as well. We've been driving statewide policy as well as local and county policy. One thing that I think is important to know about ACE is that we're a member-led organization, both at the state level and at the local level. Increasingly, our membership is becoming more and more in tune with the unfortunate reality that tenants face and low-income homeowners face in the state. So I'd like to just share one quick story about a member of ours that came on board recently to kind of show how our leadership and membership works. A member of ours in South Central joined as a member wanting help in our tenant clinics, having issues with increasing rents and also harassment. Through the Know Your Rights workshops and through the chapter meetings, in the course of 2 years, she's developed into one of our core leaders on the issue and has been working with chapter leaders and base member leaders to help coordinate trainings on homelessness and houselessness, and also how to fight back, how to go on the offensive with the issues. So we're extremely proud of the work that we do here in the county and around the state, and are excited to be a part of this coalition.
We are excited to have you with us. And Chase, same question for you. What is Climate Resolve and why have you chosen to be part of this coalition?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks for having us. We're happy to be here. Climate Resolve is a Los Angeles-based organization that builds collaborations to champion equitable climate solutions. And what we really try to do is focus on people, on Angelenos, and that's really a big reason why we've chosen to be a part of this coalition. When we talk about climate change, the sort of historical wisdom has been, talk about science, talk about polar bears and keystone species. But really, we want people to understand, how is this affecting you today? And there's really so many intersections with housing and community development. When we look at the way that we exist in cities, it's hot here, right? There are wildfires here. And housing insecurity, not being able to pay your utility bills, these are all climate issues as well. For us, it's really important to think about that. And we can look back as early as this past summer, where we have tens of thousands of Angelenos that are sleeping on the streets, that were exposed to wildfire smoke and extreme heat all in the same week. So for us, it's really, really important to think about these intersections. And I think, thinking about that can seem really apocalyptic, but we're really excited to begin to mesh these issues and work to build solutions together. I think there's a lot of brilliant people in this coalition, and we really see a brighter path forward.
I appreciate that, Chase. You have a fan in the chat or the Q&A just really calling out how environmental justice and the climate change movement really, the affordable housing crisis is so keyed into that, especially in LA, where we complain about traffic so often. That traffic isn't an accident. It relates so much to our housing challenges. So really happy to have you and other environmental justice organizations part of this. Speaking about that unique mix we have, Joe, I want to jump back to you. Y'all are often in the place of building power and building power with other, in solidarity with other groups. So, this is not the first coalition you've joined, but certainly think this is a unique one. So I want to hear your perspective on what do you think are the opportunities and challenges to the unique mix of organizations in our future LA that we don't often see working together?
Yeah, I think this coalition has some high aspirations, and I think for those of us that have been working in the tenant and housing and homeowner movement, what we've seen is that we need to bring all hands on deck, and there's a number of groups that do organizing and do mobilize the same communities that are impacted by these issues. And I think, along with others in the coalition, bringing in those groups only helps us develop that and grow that power to get to those aspirations, those goals that we've set, and the intentions that we set in our first meeting. So many of the groups that do the work already have already started this trend of leaning on the unusual suspects, so to speak. Bringing in groups that traditionally have not come into this arena, and we've been seeing a lot of success by using that strategy. So I think mirroring that strategy within this coalition and continuing to grow it out and find more groups that are working with impacted stakeholders on the issue, I think just helps us develop that and grow that power that all of us are looking to give to these low-income and extremely low-income communities of color.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I think something you said that I want to come back to you, Chase, about is this moment. This does feel like a unique, again, tipping point, breaking point, call it what you will, but it's no mistake that we're getting groups that traditionally haven't worked together to come together on this issue from a lot of different angles. So Chase, what's different about today? In your opinion, what does today represent to you versus the past that compels your organizations and others to come together in this way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think compounding crises, things just continue to get worse and reach ahead is one thing. I mean, speaking for Climate Resolve specifically, we've only been around for around 10 years. And so we've really grown our capacity and grown our work. We do technical assistance for affordable housing. We help plan complete streets. We're leading engagement with the county on the county climate vulnerability assessment. And what we see in that work really is a way to show people how climate intersects with other issues. But we've also learned so much from other organizations and communities about the issues that they're facing. So that's really been a two-way street for our organization, and really seeing how important it is to be intersectional in our work, and that we can't really work in silos to create solutions, right? If we're looking at a bike lane in a particular community, we also have to understand the history in that community. Is there community ownership of land? Are there ways to prevent displacement? Who is that bike lane for? So really, when we're thinking about the climate, we have to think about it in the context of other issues and vice versa. And so I would say kind of growing and expanding our work has been a way for us to really gain that understanding and also share what we know about the climate and how it affects people.
Amazing, thank you. And then no coalition, no campaign is worth being part of if it doesn't have a vision and doesn't have a finish line. And so, Joe, I'm curious what success of this coalition looks like for you when you joined it, when you helped create it. What made it worth it? What were you aiming for? What are you aiming for?
In conversation with the leadership of ACE here in Los Angeles, one of the important reasons for ACE LA to join this coalition was to make sure that we're a part of growing that base of power for tenants and homeowners here in the county. And success for our members would be reaching those policy and community wins at a faster pace. It's important for us to look at this issue in a way that many of us have wanted. It's really important that we take those quantum leaps in moving these policy conversations and advancing them, 5 years, 10 years down the road, faster than they would have been in this normal pace that we've been dealing with. And the membership has really pointed towards, the speed at which a larger coalition could push on those wins and achieve them.
I appreciate that perspective and that finish line. Chase, same question to you. Briefly, what does success look like for you?
Yeah, I think Joe really hit the nail on the head that efficacy is so important. We're talking about human life here. And it really is fundamentally important. I would really like to see us stoke the collective imagination of Los Angeles and really have people see that a brighter future is possible. Not only that, but it needs to be inevitable, right? And so that is something I would really like to see. And I would really like to see us continue to break down silos between our organizations, and have everyone's wins really create this virtuous cycle, right? Where our solutions support everyone else's solutions and so on and so forth.
And one of those walls that have separated groups invisibly or very visibly has been the realities of systemic racism, and how that helps some of us feel that more in a more serious way than others. So final question for you. I love this question, so I'm sorry we won't have much time to talk about it, but just briefly, there's so much talk today about systemic racism. Let's be honest, it's become a buzzword, kind of a calling card to start things. But I know that it's something that you all take very seriously. So what does it mean for this coalition to actually confront systemic racism in an authentic way? Joe and Chase.
I think Chase said this in a meeting previously, so I'll let him finish the thought. But I'm just in total agreement that we need to move from intention to actually having these systemically racist policies changed and implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's moving from intention to outcome, right? It's not really about the way that we talk about these issues. Half the battle is recognizing the harm and naming that, but we have to remedy the harm and we have to act repairably, right? We have to think about reparative planning. We have to think about really centering the voices of harmed communities and then actually accomplishing the things that they need to happen, and fundamentally changing systems so that those harms are no longer possible.
Thank you both. So much more I want to ask you, and so much more to hear from both of you all, but we know y'all are deep in it and we'll have more space to have your leadership emerge. So thank you both.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah.
Both. And as we move to the next segment, we'll hear from several more members of our steering committee. But again, check out the list of the full steering committee as we go through this. All of the people, like you heard Joe and Chase talked about, they are here not just to talk together, but to work together, to solve together, to act together. So our future has a big mission. It's laid out some bold changes. There's 4 main areas that the crew so far has identified as moves they want to make. 1, supporting and protecting renters. 2, creating more affordable housing in communities that have resisted it. 3, investing in communities that have not gotten what they need and deserve. And number 4, which is creating a new county-wide approach to funding affordable housing solutions and getting more official leadership in that. So we want to unpack these, what these 4 mean and what our future strategies are. So to unpack that with us, we have 3 more members of our incredible steering committee. We have Josie Clairfon, the coalitions and external relations managers with Trust South LA. You'll hear more about the amazing work Trust is doing in South LA. We have Doug Smith, who's the supervising senior staff attorney with Public Counsel's community development team. And we have Gary Hardy, who's the policy and advocacy director with the Social Justice Learning Institute, or SJLI. So thank you to the 3 of you all. And Doug, let me start with you. What are some of the ideas that the coalition is exploring now to support renters? So on that first category, can you unpack that for us a little bit and how that would align with other efforts and other coalitions that I know have been fighting for that?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I think, first of all, just want to say how important it is that this is even a category, that tenant protections are a centerpiece of this movement to end homelessness and advance housing justice. Because I think often when we talk about housing and housing justice, there's often a focus on building new permanent supportive housing. And our Future LA, I think, is poised to scale that up in a really transformative way, which we'll hear about in a minute. But We also know that any success in housing production is immediately wiped out if we can't also stop the crisis of evictions and displacement and rent debt that's disrupting our neighborhoods. It's dislocating people from resources and resulting in more and more people falling into homelessness. So I'm very, very excited that our future LA is prioritizing tenant protections and housing stability, not just as an afterthought, but really as a pillar of this housing justice approach. And to me, that means supporting big policies, big changes, those quantum leaps, like Joe mentioned, building momentum for things like a fully funded right to counsel, giving everyone a permanent right to an eviction attorney if they can't afford one. We're looking at securing significant unprecedented resources to help struggling renters and to preserve the affordable housing that we have in our community by taking it off the market and putting it into permanent community ownership. And then, of course, we also need to expand and strengthen rent control, which means both supporting amazing local grassroots, local campaigns for rent control and rent debt elimination, but also removing the loopholes and the harmful constraints that exist in state law. And, talking about going after the Ellis Act, going after Costa-Hawkins, because we have to think and act big. And I think just to the final thought is that, we can and we have to do all of this by following the lead of LA's incredible tenant rights community and LA's tenants' rights movement. And so I'm excited to see our future LA advance housing stability by supporting and following tenant organizing, grassroots leadership, and community power by reinforcing, not reinventing, these existing movements for renters' rights.
I appreciate that last piece you said, Doug. Shout out to all the incredible tenant rights and protections movements and work that has happened over the years, and appreciating y'all making sure it's not an accident that it's one of the pillars, because y'all have made sure it's on this new platform. And going from one movement to several others, as we hear from Gary and Josie. Gary, can you share some examples what increased investment in communities could and should look like? We know SGLI has been fighting for this for years. So would love to hear from you what this practically means.
Yes, thank you, Chris. I think you sort of said it earlier when you mentioned vibrant and thriving neighborhoods. We know that the safest neighborhoods are neighborhoods that have abundant resources and services available for everyone, not just a few. I think of neighborhoods that have, adequate housing, supportive services, permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, and rent that are at levels that meet the need of the community and not really, driven by greed, essentially. So one of the ideas that I think about, as a school board member myself, I think about the community schools model, where everyone sort of supports and sort of centers around the schools in the community and supports families to ensure that they have housing, have access to resources and services, where sort of the community is themed in shared leadership and responsibility, that we're seeking out those who have the most impact on those who have the most need, and making sure that we meet those individual needs. So I think what has to happen is we have to sort of shift the narrative around why housing exists and understand that giving people a place to dwell is first and foremost the thing that will drive their quality of life higher, that will again create safe neighborhoods, safe communities that thrive, that are the beloved communities that Dr. King talked about. But first and foremost, if people don't have a place to live and dwell, we're sort of working backwards. So I think those kind of themes come to mind when I think about what increased investment in community would entail.
Thank you for that, Gary. And Josie, this is an interesting one, because number 4 is about this affordable housing solutions entity, or what does it look like for there to be more leadership in this? So, I think Doug and Gary, the things they talked about are things that you can see and feel a little more easily. But I want, if you could share a little bit more about this other idea to change the way we drive forward affordable housing solutions in LA County. What's the basics of that idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So this coalition has proposed a new, more coordinated approach to addressing the emergency that we're finding ourselves in, specifically that a huge percentage of hardworking people cannot afford to live in LA County. So SB 679 is a state bill. It's being introduced to the state legislature and would establish the Los Angeles County Affordable Housing Solutions Agency, also known as LACASA, for the purpose of increasing funding for affordable housing in the region. So this bill would authorize the agency to propose funding measures in Los Angeles County to fund affordable housing projects, renter protection programs, and to preserve and enhance existing housing, also to finance new construction of housing developments. So this agency would be pretty unique in that it would have the ability to raise its own revenue and fund systemic solutions to the affordable housing crisis. And as a community land trust, Trust South LA looks forward to the prospect of an agency, including staff, which is able to implement home ownership programs, such as the first right of offer for tenants. So we see this kind of capacity as an essential function of government, which should adapt to constituent needs, especially those who have less power to advocate for themselves. Again, this is pretty unique because up until now, the affordable housing crisis has been left up to individual cities to manage, but we're suggesting a larger scale coordinated approach. So we know that the speculative housing market is a slippery slope for all of us, and we have to act fast to counteract it. And via this agency, we want to be able to mobilize county money and for it to be used in areas of the county that have the highest displacement risk. We're looking to create a large scale and highly effective entity, given that we're the largest county in the US. So this really would be a bird's eye view and data informed approach. There's also this new idea of ways of investing in permanently affordable housing. So we know that the answers to our housing crisis are not just traditional affordable housing financing. So SB 679 would create sources of money that are flexible enough to support solutions like land trusts and the work we do to acquire unprotected housing. We have to support creative solutions like community ownership, which prevents low-income housing from entering the speculative real estate market, especially in communities that have disproportionately experienced the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, thank you for unpacking that a little bit for us, Josie. If we have any links to SB 679, we'll be sure to put it into the chat because housing is not something that does or doesn't happen by accident. It is an intentional community choice. When we say we're a countywide coalition, we mean crossing all 88 cities in the county of Los Angeles. And if you didn't know, every city has right now the power to create or deny housing in its own community. And a lot of communities don't have the goals or the resources to create affordable housing specifically. So I think SB 679 would be a powerful shift to that. The same way we have Metro. I think what we're aiming for is saying housing is a regional solution the same way transit is. So please do look at that in the chat as we put more information in or sign up for the coalition. And the other thing that happens city by city, Doug, I want to circle back to you. There's actually a question in the chat about rent caps and rent control kind of protections that, there's been a lot of chatter about what can be legislation proposed. So if you could help us better understand where we stand right now in the landscape of renter protections across the county. Does every city, the same way with housing, like Josie talked about, does every city do its own thing, for example? Are there a group of cities doing the same thing? So what's happening right now in terms of renter protections? And then for you, what does your vision of success look like when it comes to what our coalition could do to change that or improve that?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because over the last couple of years, my team and I at Public Counsel, we've had the privilege of supporting a couple of local grassroots campaigns to adopt new rent control policies in places like Inglewood and unincorporated LA County. And when I tell people about this work, they're often very, very surprised to learn that there wasn't already rent control in these places. And the reality is that actually only a few of LA County's 88 cities have some form of rent stabilization. And then even in those cities where we do have rent control, it's not quite as protective as it could be because of these enormous loopholes that come from state laws like the Ellis Act and Costa-Hawkins. And so we actually have this really fragmented policy landscape when it comes to renter protections. And, you know, our neighborhoods and our communities, as we know and experience them, they don't just neatly align with jurisdictional boundaries. So, you know, I remember in these campaigns talking to folks who, you know, would have, there'd be one household that is fully covered by rent control, and then a neighbor literally across the street doesn't have any protections. And so this patchwork that we currently have is a really big problem, right? To say the least. I think it's whether you are protected from eviction or untenable rent increases, it should never depend on something so arbitrary as your zip code. So we really need to tackle this, and we have an important opportunity to tackle this. And I like to think about this work needing to happen in coordination at different scales. So we have tools to support individual tenants. We talked about right to counsel. We have organizing at the building level and the neighborhood level with tenant unions. We have the potential for these amazing citywide campaigns for rent stabilization. But I think where our future LA can really have success is filling gaps at that next scale up by pushing these regional countywide solutions that can lift everyone up into a framework for stable housing and then reinforce all those protections at the other scales.
Oh, that's so good. And Gary, I want to shift over to you. Doug shouted out Inglewood, which is a community y'all have done, put in a lot of labor in to make sure that community is successful. Kind of similarly to this, you know, as you jump into our future and think about a regional or statewide push, what does success look like for this coalition from SGLI's perspective, and what is it that we need to do?
Got it. Thank you for that. You know, we have to approach it as SGLI from the perspective that aligns with our mission and vision, and that's empowering through education to create those thriving communities and change systems that were no longer best serving the community. And we do this at SGLI by striving for justice through equity. And that means that we meet the individual needs of those who are most impacted in community. So really start and approach the issue by trying to really understand what the issues are, what the needs are in communities. Not really coming at it from a point of full authority, thinking we know everything, but believing in the African proverb, sort of do nothing about me without me. We want to make sure that we are privileging the voices of those who are most impacted in the community. And one example that I think about often is the Fruitvale development in Oakland, California. Initially, BART proposed a parking lot in their neighborhood that will support transit, right? So on the surface, it looked like a great idea, but the community spoke up and said, like, this is not what we need for our community. We don't need another parking lot in our community. We need affordable housing. So the community members got together and organized and were able to get the BART to invest in a mixed-use retail space that included affordable housing, but that also included a library, a school, and some retail where local small mom and pop shops could find space in the building to support themselves. So really what has to happen is this coalition has to really seek out the voices of those in communities who really for years did not have one, to ensure that there is some equity in the approaches that we take. And what equity does really, it just really provides the proper nuance and lens to issues and solutions so that we are reaching everyone. Too often, there's a standardized approach that is taken, and we miss people who have oftentimes the greatest need. But when you're approached from an equity lens, when you're driven by justice, then that means that you seek out those voices and the community members that have experienced the most impact and ensure that we develop and cultivate their leadership in cementing viable solutions.
No, thank you, Gary. It's also a good reminder of why it's so important for you all to join this coalition, because we can't appreciate what some of those local considerations, community considerations need to be without your voice. So just like Gary said, please join in and make your voice heard to make sure all of that is taken into account. Josie, speaking of community level solutions, one more for you. The vast majority of housing, like we heard in LA County, is not protected in any way. And y'all do another approach to protection, which is community land trust. So tell us a little bit about what that means and how that helps with the challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'm happy to share about what community land trusts are. So community land Trust, also known as CLTs, are nonprofit organizations that acquire and steward land permanently for a community serving purpose. The most common CLT land use is housing. In our case, we make home buying affordable. So the way that it works is primarily the CLT builds or buys homes using public or private investment. In this case, we could use county dollars, so public investment, to buy and acquire housing. The CLT then can rent the homes on its land to low-income tenants or sell just the home, not the land, to low-income buyers. And then the CLT holds the land underneath the home in trust permanently. So owners of CLT homes can then sell their home to another low-income family, and the CLT manages the sale. So when the homeowner sells, the family earns only a portion of the increased property value. The remainder is kept by the trust. So that way the affordability of the unit or the building is preserved for future low to moderate income families. So this separates the ownership of land and housing, and this approach prevents market factors from causing prices to rise significantly and guarantees that housing remains affordable for future generations. In this way, the long-term affordability of housing is preserved and long-term residents can stay in their neighborhoods. So CLTs provide low and moderate income people the opportunity to build equity through home ownership, and also to ensure that these residents are not displaced due to land speculation. So the community land trust concept is an important part of a larger preservation ecosystem for LA County. When CLTs build or rehab affordable housing and create housing developments that benefit low-income families, this intervenes in the housing market to preserve affordability. Importantly, also, this creates a path to home ownership for low-income Black and Brown Angelenos who are historically underrepresented in the housing market.
Thank you for that. So thank you for lifting up that model as a solution for all of us. So ending this segment with the final rapid fire question for each of you all. If you had a magic wand, and feel free to take out your actual magic wand if you have it, what would your magic wand thing be if you could do one thing as part of that, of this coalition? Doug, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about rent debt a lot these days, and the pandemic has had such a crushing effect on renters, especially renters of color. And we have these estimates that almost 300,000 households are behind on rent in LA County, owing up to 1.3 billion in back rent. And so this is going to be absolutely devastating in terms of evictions, displacement, and collateral consequences. So with my magic wand, I would want to mobilize all hands on deck to solve this pressing and immediate problem so that we can create a baseline of stability to then go and do all the other important things that we've been talking about today.
Thank you, Doug. Rent debt gone. Josie, how about you? Magic wand, where are we using it?
Yeah, no, I really like Doug's response. Mine would be similar, which is permanent solutions and reparations for every family who has been harmed by the predatory housing market. So as Doug has alluded to, many of the people that we work with in South Central LA are literally one moratorium away from losing their homes. And I think that we have to recognize the damage and trauma that this has inflicted, not only now during the pandemic, but over generations in historically redlined neighborhoods.
Thank you for that, bringing reparations and healing. Gary, round us out. How are we benefiting from your magic wand?
I guess sort of putting a bow on what Josie and Doug said, and that's really that we make housing really be seen as part of the natural environment, where housing is as much a right as clean air, water, and soil. So that is not a commodity that is a luxury for some and scarce for the few. So I think that's, at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is that everyone in, right? So everyone into a place of dwelling where they are safe within communities that are beautiful and thriving.
I love that. Thank you to the three of you, going from defense and preventing harm to reparations and restoration to abundance. I love that full arc. Thank you to the three of you all. Yeah, and we'll hear more from your leadership, but thank you for sharing your thoughts today. Our final segment now, we want to look forward and look at the context around us, look at what's at stake. So the status quo which is always the enemy of what's possible. And it's clearly not working. But unfortunately, it's hard to jump beyond that. So want to dig into what happens if we don't make a critical change now, what's at stake, and how you all can get involved in this. So here to share their perspectives on this, two more powerful leaders, part of the coalition, Yvonne. First off, Yvonne Figueroa, who is an organizer with LA Voice, and Tommy Newman, who's Senior Director of Impact Initiatives at the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. So Yvonne, I want to start with you. We've heard from many other steering committee members here today about why they've joined, but want to hear your perspective. Can you share about who LA Voice is and what made you all jump into this Our Future Coalition?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to name that some of the LA Voice leaders have been bringing up that when we talk about housing, some of our native leaders actually have been talking about when we talk about housing, we don't always talk about the land, the native folks' land. So I just want to uplift that. I am calling from Chumash and Kish and Tataviam land. And that we can't talk about housing without talking about the ground beneath us, right? And so LA Voice is a multi-faith, multiracial community organization made up of about 70 members and partner congregations across LA County. We are part of the Pico, California State Network, and we actually believe that power and dignity is inherent in all of us. And so we work with people on the ground every day, to make sure that people feel that power. Our three key priorities are immigration, transformative justice, and housing. And we decided to join this really powerful coalition because we believe in the collective power of people, period. And we believe that this coalition is the vehicle to build power to hold our government accountable. So we believe that we can only do this together and that it has to be rooted in the lived experience of folks. We were also key in passing HHH, and we've helped pass rent control across the county as well. And I'm excited to share about some of the stories later on this panel, but we have leaders that are leading on housing campaigns across the county. So it's not just about just like staying where we're at, we're actually like doing something about it. So thank you.
No, thank you so much. And thank you for recognizing the land that we all stand on and are doing this work from. So appreciations for that, and more appreciations for our Indigenous and Native leaders in this work. Tommy, I want to shift over to you and ask you, why is United Way doing this, and what's at stake from your perspective?
I appreciate it, and just really appreciate the thoughts and stories and reasons shared by everybody on this panel. And the questions have been flowing today, which we love to see, and over 100 people here on this call and more live on Facebook. So thank you for everyone who's been able to make the time for this today, and just so important to always be looking for how we can drive change at the scale that we need it. And I think that's what brings United Way to this project. I think United Way has been committed to ending homelessness for over a decade. And even as we have seen the number of people leaving homelessness and securing stable housing double, homelessness has nevertheless gone up. And it's gone up because we have a fundamentally broken housing system and housing market in this county. And the only way we're going to change that is through a countywide approach. The only way we're going to change that is not, fighting these fights one city at a time, 88 times, but figuring out how we collectively build the power we need to drive change, both at a statewide level. And so another question that I think I'm going to get, and I'll do it here so that we can really address the questions that are popping up, is this coalition has resolved to sort of use three key strategies to drive change. Sacramento policy, and so you heard Josie talk about SB 679, which is an example of that. Countywide ballot measures. We sometimes forget that we have the ability to collect signatures and to put policy and revenue sources on the ballot. And that's hard, and it's expensive, and it takes a lot of work. But these are the sorts of coalitions that can drive that forward. And then work through the Board of Supervisors, which also has a countywide lens. And so I think that's something that distinguishes this coalition just a little bit from some of the other work. Nobody ever wants to create coalitions just to create coalitions. It should have a clear purpose and a clear focus. And those are some reasons that are motivating United Way stepping up and saying, yes, we want to be a part of this, and also some of the examples of how we want to drive that change.
Thank you for lifting that up. So it sounds like this is a coalition built for action, particularly around passing big legislation or moves at the county or the statewide level. Yvonne, Tommy talked about the importance of stories. So, and you all work directly with so many members. So wondering if you could share some examples of what this means, what's at stake with the members that you all work with when it comes to economic pressures and housing costs.
Yeah, so I wanted to share, that I recently just had a conversation with an organizer who organizes in New City Church, and they just recently did a survey where 1/3 of the congregation is actually houseless, and they're or formerly houseless. So, this church is in downtown LA, and just to find out that shocking number is really something, right? The other story that I wanted to share was that I'm working with Ines Torres in Inglewood, where she was evicted during the pandemic and was foreclosed at the same time, right, by speculators in Inglewood. And so, but she is this powerful woman who led her community to support her in reclaiming her home and held a 6-week 24/7 vigil. It was insane, and she's still in her home, right? But these are the types of stories that we're hearing all of the time as well. I'm working with undocumented families that lost their jobs during COVID and who were backed up in rent. They fought for that first iteration of the immigrant rent relief program because they weren't receiving stipends from the federal government, right? And then finally, just wanted to name that we have leaders from Bled to Sacrament in Hollywood who are seeing luxury hotels come up and not affordable housing, right? And it's like they need affordable housing. So.
No, thank you for those stories. And as we hear about all of what's at stake, Tommy, hopefully a few people here today are getting excited about jumping into this, lending their voice, lending their questions, which apologies that we're not getting to every single question here today, but again, committed to trying to figure out other ways to answer them. Can you share a little bit about what's the step to participate, both as an organization or an individual? How can folks actually get involved?
That one's me, yeah?
Yeah.
Double checking. Got it. First of all, you should sign up. And I've been tracking a lot of these great questions. People are ready to work. People are ready to do it. So if you check out ourfuture.la, there's a sign up option. That's the way that the coalition will be communicating. We'll be putting out opportunities to support these policies, putting out opportunities to come together and build together and work together and think about these solutions and what they need to be. So step one is always signing up, and the Our Future Coalition, which we're talking about today, is what we're encouraging people to be a part of and join in. Of course, there are a lot of great organizations that are joining in to the Our Future Coalition. And so if any of the folks on this call have particularly spoken to you because of where you live or what the change you're trying to drive or the challenges you're facing in your life, you're also invited to join into those organizations because we all collectively are working on this from different spaces. So that would be the first step. Follow us on social media, ourfuture_LA on all the channels, all the spaces. There's going to be lots of really important calls to action, opportunities, ability to share your own stories, hopes, goals, needs. So that's the first step. And one of the reasons why we're doing this call today is it's early, right? It's early, and so this coalition is just getting going. It's sort of in its soft launch phase before we really start making a lot more noise. And so this is an opportunity to get on board at the very beginning.
Please do. Please jump all the way in. So we're gonna we're gonna shift a little bit to take a couple questions that have been coming in and submitted in advance as well. So first question is from Sarah in Hollywood. We're gonna direct this one to Vaughn. So Sarah's asking, how can we connect people to housing faster? It seems like the rate of people getting helped is far outpaced by names being added to waiting lists. So Yvonne, curious for your thoughts.
So it's how can we get housing faster?
How do we connect people to housing faster? Seemingly, especially when the rate of people getting helped is, not near the number of people being added to waiting lists.
Yeah, I'm just going to be fully transparent and honest. It's hard. It's hard to connect people to housing because like I have family members who themselves, it's like they're coming to me and they're like, hey, do you have anything on housing, any like affordable housing? And, I can send them the affordable housing development information that I get from direct service providers. But even I get feedback from direct service providers that it's hard connecting people to housing. But I would just say, do research in your local area of those direct service organizations that do some of that work, because it's really all in the relationship and the connections. If someone hears about something, and you've shared your story and you've told, like, it's hard getting vulnerable, about your housing insecurity, but that's what we have to do. We have to share our own stories to be able to connect it to the folks that can support us.
Yeah, seconding. It is a hard challenge and something obviously we're all gathered to try to address in a more systematic way. Second question was submitted by Jesse in the San Fernando Valley. Coming back to Tommy, how can I impact housing and homelessness policy as an individual person in 2021? Any suggestions for Jesse, Tommy?
And I'm sorry if my audio's not been working. I saw Jill's comment there in the chat that it wasn't working. I hope it's working now, but if you can't hear me, I should just stop talking. So somebody tell me if you can't hear me at all anymore. Okay, just making sure. I shared a little bit and appreciate the question. First things first is always getting on the list so that we know how to communicate with you back and forth. So that'd be my first answer. Find additional organizations to participate in and support. And I see a lot of these other really excellent questions in the Q&A, and this is just the first of many conversations with everybody here. And so we will all commit to saving these questions. We're not going to lose these questions and answering them both on our future social media accounts as well as in future conversations, because what I'm hearing and seeing across all of these questions is the reason why we're trying to come together and help drive this forward.
That's right. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for being with us, both the panelists, members of the steering committee. I know there are other members of the coalition that y'all have already jumped in, but you all are here in solidarity and doing this work along with us. And especially those of you who are in the Everyone In family, who have turned out to check out what's going on here with the Our Future LA Coalition. Like Tommy said, as a reminder, we look out on social media to see some more answers to the questions that came in. That is at Everyone In LA. So look at that handle at Everyone In LA at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We'll try to address as many of these as possible. We hope today has been helpful and informative. I'm going to reframe something I said at the beginning, appreciating the reminder that Zoom also helps us come together. So appreciating the fact that we have been able to gather at lunchtime all across this county. So thank you for making space, making time. And if you have RSVP'd, like Tommy said, the best way to keep in touch and take the next action is to make sure you're signed up. So if you haven't RSVP'd already, if you came here through another link, if you could go to everyoneInLA.org, we'll follow up with additional resources, additional questions via email, and plan to do another call like this in the future. So thank you again. We hope to see you soon. Until then, please be well. Stay safe. Let's fight together. And thank you.